that people in the White House monitor what I say. Good. And because President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken won't come on the show, I am forced to speak at you rather than to you. This is not my choice. I understand. Talk to people within your party at very high levels, elected and unelected, all the time. I know that the war in the Middle East is a major concern for you in the election. And I think that explains why you misplayed it the way you did today. Okay? You gave a mixed message. You talked tough, what sounded like a threat to your main ally in the region, and then you said you're giving them more weapons. You're treating the war against Israel as if it were another political point of compromise. This is wrong, but this is wrong, and we need to do better here, and there has to be change, and blah, 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 ceasefire. A lot of words, a lot of conditional language, a lot of half-speak, a lot of appeasement in a situation that is not about balance. It is about realities. And I get the pressure from the left. I get it. And I get how tight the race is. And I get how worried you are that you're not going to have the same base you had the last time. But that is not an excuse to be weak.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and we're going to play the rest of this. And Shondell Summer is here with me. And, you know, I wasn't a huge Chris Cuomo fan. Still not sure. He swears he's not any different now than he was at CNN. I think that NewsNation is a different kind of animal as far as networks are concerned, and they don't have an agenda. They really don't. They try to show both sides.
It's fairly balanced, I have to admit. I think he's been unleashed since he came out of CNN.
Yes.
He can say what he thinks. And, you know, they're a strong New York family background. I think that's a place that if anywhere is going to be sympathetic to Israel, it's going to be New York after 9/11.
Well, and I think, too, that if you look at Cuomo, the reason why he got ousted at CNN was because it was supposedly he was helping or advising his brother, the governor at that time, related to COVID. And you know what I like about what he said since then, since he's been on NewsNation? He says, I would do it again. You know, this is family, blood is thicker than water. I would help my brother again, even though it didn't work out for him.
Yeah, I mean, that was a bunch of Me Too backlash. And, of course, then Cuomo's acquitted, right? So there was really nothing there. I do think what happened in Israel overnight is very interesting. I think the White House is just playing the politics of this to the extent that it's very obvious. And I personally am offended. Of course, Donald Trump finally spoke out on Israel and said they're losing the optics war. But his former ambassador to Israel was quoted as saying he liked what Trump said. He thought that what he was really saying was just go in and do it.
What Trump said or what Biden said?
What Trump said.
Okay.
He said that Israel was losing the optics war in Israel. And he said, you know, they need to get it done. They need to get it done. It's not looking good. They're losing the world.
Well, I do think that if you were going to say anything good about Hamas, which I'm not going to, but they knew when they went in on October 7th that they would elicit the kind of reaction they got from Israel. And they knew that the world would react in a certain way. And the world doesn't like to see a mess. And they've had to prosecute this war in a way that no country has ever been asked to prosecute a war in the history of time. Okay, they have opened up lanes of travel every day. They have sent 70 million phone calls and text messages into phones into Gaza saying these are the times you need to get out. Nobody does that in a war. If they had gone in the way they probably should have gone in, it would be over by now. But because they've been trying to appease their allies, it's taking longer.
Well, you can't. I think if you're Israel, you can't just go in and wipe out the country. I mean, that'd be the easy solution, right? Just go in, drop a bomb, they're gone, right? But you can't do that. I mean, that's ridiculous. So you've got to go in somewhat precision in
which
terms
is what
of
they've done.
Which is what they've done. But there's mistakes that are made. I'm just wondering why is, and I know this sounds horrible, but why are these this aid that's going in and out of Gaza? Why is that not aiding and abetting the enemy? In my opinion, These people who go in, they're doing so at their own risk. They unfortunately had gotten clearance, and the wires got crossed, and they didn't think that's, they had gotten permission from the Israeli government, and the Israeli government screwed up, and they admitted it.
That's right.
They did what they're supposed to do, but it's a war, and they've got to go in to win it. And the United States sending signals to Israel that you need to back off or do this more politely, I find very offensive.
So let's hear a little more of what Chris had to say last night. Here we go.
There's a primary reality, okay? And we seem to have forgotten it. Hamas is a terror organization. You designated them as that. They stole people. They need to give the people they stole back to us, to Israel first. The hostages have become an afterthought. And that is wrong. And the reason it has happened is even more wrong. The reason it has happened is because other political exigencies and agendas have overtaken their relevance. The aid workers being hit, horrible. Matters, of course. Deserves attention, absolutely. But also makes the lack of attention to the hostages apparent. Hitting the aid workers, angels among us, is of course unacceptable. Everybody knows that. It also must be explained. And you should have called for that explanation today, because you know they already know the reason. This is a very sophisticated organization at the IDF. How can you focus on the aid workers who bravely took the risk to be there? Angels among us. That's why I and the team are willing to risk going there to see their work in action so people can see the need. But if you're going to say that what happened to them demands action, how do you not start with the return of the hostages as the most wrongfully injured victims in the entire situation? Every time you speak about what must happen, and you do not begin with, hey, terrorists, give back who you stole, you are giving terrorists a pass. Every time you don't start there, you lose the Israeli ear. Now, if Hamas gives back the hostages, which you would likely require as a sine qua non, without this, nothing, in any other situation, certainly if it were you in Israel's position, then you have leverage. You have a basis for an exchange of wants. Not stop, cease fire, expose yourself, and then we hope to get the hostages back. You wouldn't do that. You're asking Israel to do what you never would. And I don't know who else has. Pulling back under threat, existential threat, meaning they want you exterminated. And, by the way, you don't get your people back first. And it does feed the idea. I know you hear this, especially you, Tony. And I know I hear it because I know who's talked to you about it. That it feeds this malignancy that Jews are treated differently. That Hamas is given more of a break than your main ally. Why even mention ceasefire before they give back the hostages? Now, there's an obvious reason. Too much death in Gaza. Too many innocents dying in Gaza. Children dying, starving in Gaza. You are right. We must all agree. But what has the best chance of motivating a mitigation? Threats to Israel? Never. Political pressure on Bibi? He loves it. All the more reason to force the main want. Get the hostages back. You know what response I get to this? Yeah, but Hamas, they don't want to give them back. They're bad guys. They need the leverage. Really? So instead, you want to force Israel to relent. Imagine how much stronger the message to Bibi would be if you came in saying, we told Hamas they have until X to hand over the hostages or else. And when they do, you need to do X, Y, and Z. The people in Gaza are calling for the release of the hostages more vehemently than you are. They know Hamas has put them in this hell. What do you know? Then you have a basis for telling Israel there has to be change. Otherwise, you're basically asking Israel to give Hamas the win and withdraw. It will not happen. You know this, which means you went in today saying those things to Bibi, having them reported when you know it's not going to happen. Not under Bibi, not under anyone, if the surveys are to be believed. So stop treating this as if Israel should be the bigger person. They are convinced they are targeted for extermination. Stop treating this like it's a debate about the debt ceiling, like it's brinksmanship, like it's a fake deadline. There is too much blood on the floor for this to be about a typical compromise, and you know it. The place to push is obvious. Hostages. And with Israel, aid. Several reasons. It's the right thing to do as a moral authority. People are starving. It's bad, and it makes Israel look bad. There is less aid getting in than before October 7th, and there is more need for it than ever. You are making a generation ready for radicalization, and that's understandable. If all you know is a life of squalor and death, what do you think is going to happen? And they're going to blame America as much as Israel. This is also a chance to widen the role of other allies to make this more regional with players and more stakeholders, even if they're only monitoring and securing aid, which you can argue Israel should not be in sole control of. And then you will have more reason to have peace because there's much more precedent of an international coalition monitoring humanitarian aid than there is for asking for a withdrawal without any assurance of safety. You can provide no assurance that Israel will not be hit immediately because that's what Hamas has promised. That's what Hezbollah is doing. And the other Iranian proxies, now be honest, you have ignored. You have given Iran a pass. You have given them back billions of dollars. If you're going to make Israel take on Iran for you, then at least give them a chance to be successful. This is not ending anytime soon, and you should tell the American people.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and that was Chris Cuomo, which I think, I didn't agree with every word he said, but I think he did a better job than I have heard from almost anyone laying out the complications of this issue.
Especially with Iran.
And the weakness of our side. When he said Tony, he was talking about Tony Blinken.
Sure.
Okay, and when he's talking about you, he's talking about the president, just so our listeners know.
And, he makes a good point. After this war is over, hopefully Israel will prevail and get the hostages released. And then there's got to be some governance of the area. It's either going to be Israel, it's going to be the Palestinian Authority, it's going to be all the other countries in the region, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, a coalition of them, or it's going to be the UN. And of those four choices, the worst is the Palestinian Authority. The second worst is the UN. The optimal solution is for the countries in the region that are civilized to take over that area.
Absolutely. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more with you.